Stop. Right now, while you're watching this, someone with half your intelligence is making twice the impact you are. They're not smarter. They're not more talented. They're not even working harder. But they understand 7 rules that you've never been taught. Rules that separate people who think they're intelligent from people who are intellectually unstoppable. Rules that Machiavelli discovered 500 years ago by watching the most powerful minds in history operate in complete silence that you've been lied to about intelligence your entire life. Society told you that intelligence means having the right answers, getting good grades, memorizing information, winning arguments. But that's not intelligence. That's performance. Real intelligence, the kind that actually changes your life, has nothing to do with what you know. It has everything to do with how you think. And most people will never learn the difference. Here's what nobody tells you. The smartest person in the room is almost never the one talking the most. They're not the one trying to prove their intelligence. They're not the one who needs everyone to know how much they've read or studied. The truly intelligent person is doing something completely different. They're observing. They're calculating. They're seeing patterns that everyone else misses. And they're using those patterns to position themselves 3 moves ahead of everyone in the room. That I'm going to share 7 rules with you today. Not theories, not academic concepts. Rules that actually work in the real world. Rules that Machiavelli observed in Renaissance Italy, where intellectual power meant the difference between ruling kingdoms and losing your head. Rules that still work today because human nature hasn't changed in 5 centuries. But I need you to understand something before we begin. These rules will make you more effective, more influential, and more successful. But they'll also make you uncomfortable. Because once you see how intelligence really works, you can never go back to the naive version of yourself that believed hard work and good intentions were enough. Now I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I choose strategic thinking over emotional reaction. Because what you're about to learn will separate you from 95% of people who think they're intelligent but are actually just well-educated. Let's begin with the first rule. And this one is going to destroy everything you think you know about learning. Rule number 1. Never learn from success. Always learn from failure. Everyone gets this backwards. When something works, when someone succeeds, when a strategy pays off, most people study it obsessively. They read the books. They watch the interviews. They try to copy the exact steps. But here's the brutal truth. Success teaches you almost nothing useful. Success is contaminated by luck, timing, and circumstances you can't replicate. Success makes people arrogant. It makes them believe they're smarter than they are. It makes them stop questioning their assumptions. Success is the worst teacher because it rewards you for things you might have done wrong. But failure is pure education. When something fails, you get clean data about what doesn't work. When someone loses, you learn which strategies to avoid. When a plan falls apart, you see exactly which assumptions were wrong. Machiavelli understood this completely. He didn't study successful rulers to learn how to gain power. He studied failed rulers to learn how to keep it. He analyzed every mistake, every miscalculation, every moment when a leader's assumptions about human nature proved catastrophically wrong. That's why The Prince is filled with warnings about what not to do, rather than blueprints for what to do. Think about your own life. How many times have you learned more from your worst failures than your biggest successes? Your failures forced you to question everything. Your successes let you coast on what you thought you already knew. But most people avoid studying failure. They avoid thinking about their mistakes. They avoid analyzing what went wrong. They move on quickly because failure feels uncomfortable. This is exactly why most people never develop real intelligence. They're learning from the wrong teacher. Here's what intellectually unstoppable people do differently. They seek out failure obsessively. Not their own failures only, but everyone's failures. They study failed businesses. They analyze collapsed relationships. They examine lost wars, bankrupt companies, destroyed reputations. They're building a massive database of what doesn't work. And this database becomes more valuable than any success story because it tells them which paths to avoid completely. When everyone else is running toward what looks like success, they're running away from patterns they've seen fail 1,000 times before. But here's where it gets really sophisticated. They don't just study random failures. They study failures of people who were smarter than them, people who had more resources, people who should have succeeded but didn't. Because if someone with every advantage still failed, that failure reveals something fundamental about reality that success stories hide. That failure exposes which assumptions about the world are dangerously wrong. Let me give you a specific example. Everyone studies successful entrepreneurs to learn about business. They read about how Steve Jobs built Apple, how Elon Musk scaled Tesla. But intellectually unstoppable people study something different. They study Theranos. They study WeWork. They study every hyped startup that imploded spectacularly despite having brilliant founders, unlimited funding, and media praise. Why? Because those failures reveal which strategies work in theory but fail in practice. Those failures show which personality traits lead to self-destruction even when you're winning. Those failures teach lessons that no success story ever could. Now I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I learn more from failure than success. Because the next rule is going to show you why most people's opinions are completely worthless and why listening to them makes you weaker, not stronger. Rule number 2. Master the art of strategic ignorance. This is the rule that separates truly intelligent people from people who just accumulate information. Most people think intelligence means knowing everything about everything. They consume content constantly. They read every article. They listen to every podcast. They follow every news story. They have opinions about everything. And they think this makes them smart. It doesn't. It makes them scattered, reactive, and intellectually weak. Because they've never learned the most important skill of intelligence. Knowing what to ignore. Your attention is your most valuable resource. More valuable than your time. More valuable than your money. Because whatever has your attention shapes how you think. And how you think determines every outcome in your life. But most people give their attention away freely to whoever demands it loudest. They let the news cycle hijack their thinking. They let social media algorithms control their focus. They let other people's priorities become their priorities. This isn't intelligence. This is intellectual slavery. Machiavelli observed that the most powerful people weren't the ones who knew everything. They were the ones who knew exactly what mattered and ignored everything else ruthlessly. They didn't get distracted by noise. They didn't waste energy on information that wouldn't change their decisions. They practiced strategic ignorance, deliberately choosing to remain uninformed about things that didn't serve their goals. This freed up massive amounts of mental energy for the things that actually mattered. Here's how this works in practice. Intellectually unstoppable people have a simple filter for every piece of information they encounter. They ask one question. Will knowing this change my decision or action in any meaningful way? If the answer is no, they ignore it completely. No matter how interesting it is. No matter how much everyone else is talking about it. No matter how much FOMO they feel about not knowing. They ignore it because they understand that consuming irrelevant information isn't neutral. It's actively harmful. It clutters your thinking. It creates false priorities. It makes you feel informed while actually making you less effective. Let me show you what this looks like. Most people follow the news obsessively. They know every political scandal, every celebrity drama, every trending topic. They think this makes them informed citizens. But ask them how any of this information changed their actual decisions or actions. Usually, the answer is it didn't. They consumed hundreds of hours of news content that had zero impact on their actual life. Meanwhile, intellectually unstoppable people might go weeks without checking the news. Not because they're ignorant, because they're strategic. They know that truly important information always reaches them eventually. But unimportant information only reaches them if they go looking for it. This applies to everything. Most people have opinions about subjects they'll never work in, problems they'll never solve, situations they'll never face. They debate politics they can't influence. They argue about scientific theories they don't understand. They have strong feelings about celebrities they'll never meet. All of this is wasted intellectual energy. Energy that could be focused on things they can actually affect. Intellectually unstoppable people are comfortable saying, I don't know and I don't need to know about most topics. This isn't ignorance. This is intellectual discipline. But here's where most people fail at this. They think strategic ignorance means being uninformed. It doesn't. It means being deliberately focused. Intellectually unstoppable people know more about their specific domain than anyone else. They go incredibly deep on the things that matter to their goals. They become genuine experts rather than superficial generalists. They just refuse to spread their attention across hundreds of topics that don't matter. They'd rather know everything about 3 things than something about 300 things. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I ignore what doesn't matter. Because rule number 3 is going to reveal why most people's thinking is completely backwards and why the opposite approach gives you an almost unfair advantage. Rule number 3. Think in probabilities, not certainties. This is the mental shift that separates amateurs from masters in every field. Most people think in black and white. Something is either true or false. A decision is either right or wrong. A person is either trustworthy or untrustworthy. But reality doesn't work that way. Reality operates in probabilities, not certainties. And people who can't think probabilistically are constantly shocked when the world doesn't match their rigid expectations. Here's what happens when you think in certainties. You make a prediction. You become attached to that prediction. You start seeing only evidence that confirms it. You dismiss evidence that contradicts it. And when reality inevitably delivers something different, you're completely unprepared. You waste time being angry or confused instead of adapting. This is how most people operate. They're constantly surprised by outcomes they should have anticipated because they assign certainty to situations that were always probabilistic. Machiavelli never thought in certainties. He thought in probabilities. When he advised rulers about strategy, he never said this will definitely work or that will definitely fail. He said this approach increases your probability of success, while that approach decreases it. He understood that even the best strategy can fail due to factors beyond your control. And even terrible strategies sometimes succeed through pure luck. The goal isn't to guarantee outcomes. That's impossible. The goal is to consistently make decisions that tilt probabilities in your favor. Intellectually unstoppable people have completely internalized this principle. When they make a decision, they're not trying to be right. They're trying to make the highest probability play given available information. When things don't work out, they don't feel stupid or defeated. They recognize that they made the right decision even if it produced the wrong outcome, because they know that doing the right thing doesn't guarantee results. It just improves your odds. Over hundreds of decisions, better probability thinking compounds into dramatically better results. Let me give you a practical example. Most people evaluate relationships in binary terms. Is this person good for me or bad for me? Should I trust them or not trust them? But intellectually unstoppable people think probabilistically about relationships. They ask different questions. What's the probability this person will follow through on commitments? What's the probability they'll act in my interest when it conflicts with theirs? What's the probability this relationship will still be valuable in 5 years? They're not looking for certainty. They're assessing probabilities and adjusting their behavior accordingly. This changes everything. If you assess someone as 70% reliable, you can work with them while having backup plans for the 30% of times they'll let you down. If you assess a business opportunity as having 40% chance of success, but here's where this gets really powerful. Most people make terrible predictions because they confuse what they want to happen with what's likely to happen. They want their startup to succeed, so they tell themselves it has a 90% chance of success when the actual probability is 20%. They want someone to be trustworthy, so they ignore red flags that suggest otherwise. They want their current approach to work, so they don't prepare alternatives. This is emotional thinking disguised as logical thinking, and it destroys people constantly. Intellectually unstoppable people separate what they want from what's likely. They force themselves to make honest probability assessments even when those assessments are uncomfortable. Even when it means admitting their favorite option probably won't work. Even when it means accepting that they might fail despite doing everything right. This emotional discipline to see probabilities clearly is what lets them adapt faster, prepare better, and win more consistently than people who can't handle uncomfortable truths. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. I think in probabilities, not wishes. Because rule number 4 reveals why most people waste years of their life solving the wrong problems completely. Rule number 4. Always question the question itself. Most people accept problems as they're presented to them. Someone asks a question, and they immediately start working on the answer. Someone presents a challenge, and they immediately start solving it. But intellectually unstoppable people do something completely different first. They question whether they're even solving the right problem. Because most of the time, the question being asked is the wrong question entirely. And answering the wrong question correctly is worse than useless. It's actively harmful because it wastes resources while making you feel productive. Machiavelli understood that the most important strategic decisions weren't about finding better answers. They were about asking better questions. When other advisors were debating the best way to solve a problem the ruler presented, Machiavelli was questioning whether that problem was even the real issue. Often, the surface problem was just a symptom of a deeper problem nobody was addressing. Solving the surface problem would provide temporary relief while the real problem continued growing. This is why Machiavelli's advice seemed counterintuitive to others. He was operating at a different level of analysis entirely. Here's how this plays out in real life. Someone says, "I need to make more money." Most people immediately start thinking about raises, side hustles, or better jobs. But the person who questions the question asks, "Why do you need more money?" Often, the real problem isn't income. It's spending patterns, lifestyle inflation, or trying to solve emotional problems with material purchases. Solving the surface question by earning more won't fix anything if the deeper issue is never addressed. You'll just be broke at a higher income level. Or someone says, "How do I get this person to like me?" Most people immediately strategize about being more likable. But questioning the question reveals a deeper issue. Why do you need this specific person's approval? What does their approval represent to you? Often, the real problem is internal validation needs, not external relationship problems. No amount of being liked by that person will fill an internal void. You're solving the wrong problem entirely. This applies to absolutely everything. How do I grow my business faster? Maybe the real question is, do I even have a business worth growing? Or am I scaling something fundamentally flawed? How do I fix this relationship? Maybe the real question is, should this relationship exist at all? Or am I trying to fix something that's broken by design? How do I achieve this goal? Maybe the real question is this even my goal? Or am I pursuing someone else's definition of success? Intellectually unstoppable people have developed a systematic approach to questioning questions. First, they identify the assumption embedded in the question. Every question contains assumptions about what matters and what's possible. Most people never examine these assumptions. They just accept them and work within their constraints. Second, they ask who benefits from this question being asked this way. Often, the way a problem is framed serves someone else's interests, not yours. Recognizing this lets you reframe the problem to serve your interests instead. Third, they look for the question behind the question. What's the real concern that prompted this surface question? Addressing that deeper concern often makes the surface question irrelevant. Let me give you a business example. A company asks, "How do we increase customer retention?" Most teams immediately brainstorm retention strategies. Better onboarding, more features, loyalty programs. But someone who questions the question might ask, why are customers leaving in the first place? Further investigation reveals customers aren't leaving because of lack of features. They're leaving because the product doesn't actually solve their core problem. It solves a problem the company assumed they had. The real question isn't how to retain customers better. It's whether we're even solving the right problem for the right people. Solving the retention question without addressing this deeper question would waste enormous resources on keeping the wrong customers using the wrong product. This principle extends beyond professional life into everything. Most people spend their entire lives answering questions that were given to them by parents, schools, society, media. Questions like, how do I get into the best college? How do I climb the corporate ladder? How do I afford a bigger house? They never question whether these are even their questions. They never ask whether the entire framework of what constitutes success is serving them or controlling them. This is why so many successful people feel empty. They got incredible answers to questions that were never really theirs to begin with. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I question the question itself. Because rule number 5 is about to expose the most dangerous trap that destroys intelligent people constantly, and most never even realize they're caught in it. Rule number 5. Never confuse complexity with intelligence. This is the trap that destroys more intelligent people than anything else. They think intelligence means making things complicated, using sophisticated language, creating elaborate theories, building complex systems. But that's not intelligence. That's insecurity disguised as sophistication. Real intelligence makes complexity simple. It takes difficult concepts and makes them accessible. It finds the elegant solution instead of the complicated one. Because anyone can make something complicated. It takes genuine intelligence to make something simple. Machiavelli's writing demonstrated this perfectly. The Prince isn't filled with academic jargon or complex philosophical frameworks. It's written in plain, direct language that anyone can understand. But the ideas are devastatingly sophisticated. He took 5 centuries of political philosophy and distilled it into practical principles that a merchant or soldier could immediately apply. This simplicity isn't dumbing down. It's the highest form of intelligence, being so clear in your thinking that complexity becomes unnecessary. Here's what happens when you confuse complexity with intelligence. You start using unnecessarily complicated language to sound smart. You make simple decisions more difficult than they need to be. You create elaborate systems when simple solutions would work better. You become attached to complexity because you think it makes you look intelligent. But what you're actually doing is making yourself less effective. You're creating friction and confusion where clarity would serve you better. You're making yourself harder to understand, harder to work with, and less able to execute quickly. Intellectually unstoppable people have the opposite approach. They're constantly simplifying. They take complex information and extract the essential principles. They communicate in the simplest terms that fully capture the idea. They design systems that are as simple as possible while still being effective. This doesn't mean they think simplistically. It means they've done the hard work of truly understanding something deeply enough to explain it simply. As Einstein supposedly said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Let me show you why this matters practically. In business, the most successful strategies are almost always simple. Focus on one thing and do it better than anyone else. Find underserved customers and serve them obsessively. Create something people actually want instead of what you think they should want. These aren't complicated insights, but executing them requires genuine intelligence because you have to resist the temptation to make things more complicated than they need to be. Most failed businesses died because they complicated their strategy, not because their strategy was too simple. The same principle applies to personal development. The fundamentals that actually work are laughably simple. Sleep 8 hours. Exercise regularly. Eat mostly whole foods. Build relationships with good people. Work on skills that compound. Stay consistent over long periods. Read books that challenge your thinking. There's nothing complicated about this. But most people ignore these simple fundamentals because they're not sophisticated enough. Instead, they chase complex biohacking protocols, elaborate productivity systems, and advanced optimization techniques. They're solving problems they don't have while ignoring the simple solutions to problems they do have. This complexity addiction shows up everywhere. In relationships, people create elaborate communication frameworks instead of just being honest. In fitness, people follow complicated training protocols instead of consistently doing the basics. In finance, people chase complex investment strategies instead of simply spending less than they earn and investing the difference. The complexity makes them feel intelligent. The simplicity makes them feel like they're missing something. But the people getting results are almost always the ones doing simple things consistently, not complicated things occasionally. Intellectually unstoppable people have learned to recognize when complexity is serving them and when it's just making them feel smart. They use a simple test. Does this complexity improve results, or does it just make the process feel more sophisticated? If removing complexity wouldn't change outcomes, the complexity is waste. It's intellectual decoration, not functional design. They ruthlessly eliminate it because they'd rather get results than feel clever. But here's the deeper insight. The reason most people complicate things unnecessarily is because simplicity is harder than complexity. It's easy to add more steps, more features, more considerations. It's difficult to remove things until only the essential remains. It's easy to use technical jargon that sounds impressive. It's difficult to explain something in plain language that everyone understands. Simplicity requires genuine understanding. Complexity lets you hide behind sophistication. This is why insecure people almost always overcomplicate. They're using complexity as a shield against being exposed as less knowledgeable than they want to appear. The path to intellectual power isn't learning to think more complexly. It's learning to think more clearly. Complexity emerges naturally from reality. You don't need to add it. What you need to do is cut through it. Find the signal in the noise. Identify the core principle beneath the surface complications. See the pattern that makes everything else make sense. This is what Machiavelli did with political power. He saw through all the moral philosophy and religious justification and identified the simple, brutal principles that actually governed how power worked. Those principles were always there. He just had the intelligence to see them clearly while everyone else was lost in comfortable complexity. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Simple beats complicated. Because rule number 6 reveals the one thing that prevents most people from ever developing real strategic intelligence, and it's something you're probably doing right now without realizing it. Rule number 6. Stop performing intelligence for others. This might be the most important rule, and it's the hardest one for most people to follow. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that appearing intelligent was more important than actually being intelligent. You learned to perform intelligence for teachers, parents, employers, peers. You learned which words to use, which opinions to have, which credentials to display. And you started optimizing for looking smart instead of getting smart. This is intellectual suicide. Because the moment you start performing intelligence for an audience, you stop developing real intelligence for yourself. Here's how this trap works. When you're performing intelligence, you're constantly concerned with how others perceive you. You choose what to say based on whether it makes you look smart, not whether it's true or useful. You choose what to study based on whether it's impressive, not whether it serves your actual goals. You choose which questions to ask based on whether they make you seem sophisticated, not whether you actually need the answers. Every decision becomes about managing perception instead of pursuing truth. And this completely destroys your ability to think independently. Machiavelli didn't care about appearing intelligent to his contemporaries. He cared about understanding power accurately. This is why he could write things that offended everyone's moral sensibilities. He wasn't trying to win approval. He was trying to describe reality as he observed it. If reality was uncomfortable, he wrote uncomfortable truths. If reality contradicted popular beliefs, he contradicted popular beliefs. He optimized for accuracy, not acceptance. This is why The Prince was so controversial. It violated the performance of intelligence that everyone else was engaged in. It said things that intelligent people weren't supposed to say. Intellectually unstoppable people have broken free from performance mode. They're not trying to impress anyone with their intelligence. They're trying to develop intelligence that produces actual results. This changes everything. They can admit when they don't know something without feeling inadequate. They can ask basic questions without worrying about looking stupid. They can change their mind publicly when they get better information. They can pursue knowledge in unfashionable fields if that knowledge serves their goals. They're free to actually learn instead of pretending they already know. Think about how much energy you waste performing intelligence. In meetings, you craft your contributions to sound smart rather than just saying what you actually think. On social media, you share content that makes you look well-informed rather than content you genuinely find valuable. In conversations, you use sophisticated language even when simpler words would communicate better. All of this is performance. And every moment spent performing is a moment not spent actually developing intelligence. You can't do both simultaneously. You're either thinking for yourself or thinking for your audience. The choice determines everything. Here's the test. If everyone you knew suddenly disappeared tomorrow, would you still study what you're studying, read what you're reading, think what you're thinking? If the answer is no, you're in performance mode. You're optimizing for external validation instead of internal development. And this means your intelligence is shaped by what others reward, not by what actually serves you. You've outsourced your intellectual development to people who have no stake in your success. The hardest part about breaking performance addiction is that initially, you'll look less intelligent to others. Because you'll stop using impressive language. You'll admit gaps in your knowledge. You'll ask obvious questions. You'll be learning in public instead of pretending to already know. But this temporary hit to your perceived intelligence is the price of developing real intelligence. And within months, the results speak for themselves. While others are still performing, you're actually improving. While they're maintaining appearances, you're gaining capabilities. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I develop intelligence, not perform it. Because the final rule brings everything together and shows you exactly how to implement all of this in a way that compounds over time into unstoppable intellectual power. Rule number 7. Build systems, not goals. This is the rule that transforms everything we've discussed from interesting ideas into actual life changes. Most people focus on goals. They set targets. They make plans. They create vision boards. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Because goals without systems are just wishes. Systems are what actually produce results. And intellectually unstoppable people understand the difference completely. Here's the fundamental insight. Goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. If you're a writer, your goal might be to write a best-selling book. Your system is the writing schedule you follow every single day. If you're an entrepreneur, your goal might be to build $1 million business. Your system is how you spend your time and energy consistently. The goal tells you where you want to go. The system is how you get there. And most people obsess over the destination while ignoring the vehicle. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in having better goals than other political advisors. Everyone wanted power and stability. His genius was in having better systems for analyzing situations and making decisions. He had a systematic way of evaluating loyalty, assessing threats, and choosing strategies. This system produced consistently good judgment regardless of circumstances. Other advisors relied on intuition or moral principles. When circumstances changed, their judgment failed. Machiavelli's system-based approach kept working because systems are context-independent. They work regardless of whether conditions are favorable or unfavorable. Let me show you why this matters for intelligence specifically. Most people have the goal of becoming smarter. They want to be more knowledgeable, think more clearly, make better decisions. But they have no system for achieving this. They read randomly when they feel like it. They think about important questions occasionally. They pursue learning inconsistently. And they wonder why their intelligence doesn't improve. Meanwhile, intellectually unstoppable people have systematic approaches to everything. They have systems for how they consume information, how they process ideas, how they make decisions, how they learn new skills. The system runs whether they feel motivated or not. And over time, the system produces dramatic results that goal setting alone never could. Here's what an intelligence-building system actually looks like. First, they have a systematic reading practice. Not reading whatever seems interesting in the moment, but deliberately reading to fill gaps in their knowledge or challenge their current thinking. They might commit to reading one book per week on a specific topic for 3 months to develop genuine expertise. Or they might read 1 hour every morning before anything else, regardless of how they feel. The system ensures consistent input of new information and ideas. Second, they have a systematic thinking practice. Most people think reactively, only when forced by circumstances. Intellectually unstoppable people schedule thinking time. They might spend 30 minutes every morning with a notebook, thinking through one important question. Or they might take a weekly review session where they analyze what worked and what didn't. The system ensures they're regularly processing information instead of just consuming it. This is where information becomes wisdom. Third, they have systematic decision-making processes. Instead of deciding based on how they feel in the moment, they have frameworks they apply consistently. When facing a major decision, they might have a checklist of factors to consider. When evaluating an opportunity, they might have a scoring system. When assessing risk, they might have standard questions they always ask. The system removes emotion and bias from decisions. It ensures they make choices based on principles, not impulses. Fourth, they have systematic feedback loops. Most people never deliberately analyze their own thinking and decision-making. Intellectually unstoppable people build this analysis into their system. They might keep a decision journal where they record why they made each major decision and what they expected to happen. 6 months later, they review these entries and see which of their predictions were accurate and which weren't. This creates a feedback loop that improves their judgment over time. The system ensures they're learning from experience instead of just having experiences. Fifth, they have systematic skill development. They don't randomly pick up skills when they seem useful. They systematically identify which skills would compound most with their existing abilities, then build deliberate practice into their schedule. They might spend the first hour of every workday practicing one specific skill for 90 days until it's mastered. The system ensures continuous improvement instead of random dabbling. Now here's why systems beat goals for intelligence development. Goals are static. You either achieve them or you don't. Then what? You set another goal and start over. Systems are dynamic. Every day the system runs, you get slightly better. The improvement compounds continuously. With goals, you're motivated only when the goal feels achievable and valuable. With systems, motivation becomes irrelevant. The system runs regardless of how you feel. With goals, you can succeed through luck or favorable circumstances. With systems, you're building capabilities that work in any circumstance. Think about physical fitness as an analogy. Having a goal to lose 20 pounds is less powerful than having a system of exercising 5 days per week and eating primarily whole foods. The goal can be achieved through a crash diet that destroys your metabolism. The system builds sustainable health that lasts. The goal creates pressure and anxiety about the outcome. The system creates confidence because you know you're doing the right things consistently. The goal ends when you hit your target weight. The system continues indefinitely, preventing you from backsliding. Intelligence works exactly the same way. Having a goal to become smarter is vague and unmeasurable. Having a system of reading 1 hour daily, thinking and writing for 30 minutes, and deliberately practicing decision-making creates continuous improvement that compounds over years. The system approach means you can't fail. You're either running your system or you're not. If you run your system today, you win today. Do that enough days in a row, and you become intellectually unstoppable, not through any single breakthrough, but through the compound effect of systematic improvement. But here's the key insight about systems that most people miss. Good systems are designed to be easy to maintain and hard to abandon. Bad systems are the opposite. They require constant willpower and motivation, so people abandon them quickly. Intellectually unstoppable people design their systems to work with their psychology, not against it. They make their systems so simple and convenient that not doing them feels harder than doing them. They build triggers and routines that automate the system as much as possible. They remove friction from the behaviors they want and add friction to the behaviors they don't want. For example, instead of having a vague goal to read more, they might put a book on their pillow every morning. When they go to bed, they have to move the book. This creates a trigger to read. The system makes the desired behavior easier than avoiding it. Or instead of trying to think more deeply about important questions, they might schedule a specific thinking time in their calendar. The system removes the decision-making from the behavior. It just becomes something they do at that time, like brushing teeth. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I build systems that compound. Because now we're going to bring all 7 rules together and show you exactly how they interact to create unstoppable intellectual power. They make decisions based on results, not optics. 7th, they build systems. Rule 7. They have systematic processes for customer acquisition, product development, and decision-making. These systems run consistently regardless of whether they feel motivated or inspired. The result? While most businesses fail because they're solving the wrong problem, building unnecessary complexity, chasing trends, and making emotional decisions, this business succeeds because they've systematically eliminated all those failure modes. They're not smarter than other entrepreneurs. They're more systematic about applying intelligence. That's the difference between being smart and being intellectually unstoppable. Now here's what you need to understand about implementing these 7 rules. You can't adopt all of them perfectly starting tomorrow. That's not how behavior change works. What you can do is start with one rule that resonates most strongly with you right now. Maybe you need to stop performing intelligence and start developing it genuinely. Or maybe you need to build systems instead of just setting goals. Or maybe you need to start learning from failure instead of avoiding it. Pick one rule. Implement it systematically for 30 days. Notice how it changes your thinking and your results. Then add another rule. Then another. Over 6 months, you'll have integrated all 7 rules into how you naturally operate. The beautiful thing about these rules is that they're self-reinforcing. The more you practice one, the easier the others become. Learning from failure makes you less attached to being right, which makes it easier to stop performing intelligence. Thinking probabilistically makes you less shocked by negative outcomes, which makes it easier to learn from failure. Building systems makes everything else automatic instead of requiring constant decision-making. Each rule you master makes the next one easier. But I need you to understand something critical before you close this video. These rules will make you more effective, more successful, and more influential. They will also make you different from most people around you. You'll start seeing things others don't see. You'll make decisions others don't understand. You'll pursue paths others think are risky. This difference will be uncomfortable. Some people will think you've changed in ways they don't like. Some relationships will naturally fall away because you're no longer operating on the same wavelength. This is normal. This is the cost of intellectual independence. You can't become intellectually unstoppable while remaining exactly the same person you are now. Machiavelli paid this cost. His honesty about power made him controversial. His willingness to describe reality instead of idealized versions of reality made people uncomfortable. His refusal to perform conventional morality made him seem dangerous. But his insights have survived 5 centuries because they were true. Truth is more durable than comfortable lies. Power is more real than pretty illusions. Intelligence that produces results is more valuable than intelligence that produces approval. The choice is yours. You can continue being the person who has interesting ideas but doesn't implement them, who reads about these principles but doesn't apply them, who understands intellectually but doesn't change behaviorally. Most people make this choice. It's comfortable. It's safe. It requires nothing of you. Or you can become intellectually unstoppable. You can systematically implement these 7 rules until they become how you naturally think and operate. You can build the kind of strategic intelligence that compounds over decades into capabilities most people never develop. You can join the small percentage of people who don't just consume information about intelligence, but actually become more intelligent. If you choose the second path, start today, not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect. Today, pick one rule. Build one small system around implementing it. Run that system tomorrow, then the next day, then the next. Don't try to transform overnight. Just commit to systematic improvement that compounds over time. Because that's what intellectually unstoppable people do. They don't have one breakthrough moment. They have thousands of small improvements that add up to dramatic transformations. Remember what you affirmed in the comments. I choose strategic thinking over emotional reaction. Now live it. Stop reacting to circumstances. Start strategically building the intelligence that lets you shape circumstances. Stop hoping the world will reward your good intentions. Start developing the capabilities that make you valuable regardless of circumstances. Stop waiting for permission to become intellectually powerful. Start systematically implementing the rules that make intellectual power inevitable. The world doesn't need more intelligent people who do nothing with their intelligence. The world needs more intellectually unstoppable people who use their intelligence to create value, solve real problems, and make things better. You can be one of those people. These 7 rules are your roadmap. The only question is whether you'll actually follow it. If this video changed how you think about intelligence, hit that like button. If you want more content about strategic thinking and psychological power, subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment telling me which of these 7 rules resonated most with you and which one you're going to implement first. Until next time, remember that intelligence isn't what you know. It's how you think. And how you think determines everything. Stay strategic. Stay systematic. Stay intellectually unstoppable.